Welcome, everyone, to week one of the PFF betting show. And we got a little bit new group here this year for our first show back. We got Judah coming back like we had last year, and Mason Cameron here. Just moved to Cincinnati, came on as a betting analyst in the offseason. I'm excited to have you on board, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Ben. I snuck in the back door. They couldn't stop me. So, now I'm here, happy Cincinnati native, former Denver native, and I'm excited to, pick some games with you boys today. It's going to be a lot of fun. So,
Judah, how are you doing?
Doing great. I mean, last night is a special night. A little disappointed we got, an hour of a delay there, but there's nothing quite like opening kickoff. Awesome game, awesome first half, and I'm just so excited for the season.
It really is Christmas morning for us in the stage of our life that we are in right now. And honestly, the most disappointing thing about the hour-long weather break last night was the quality of football that came back after compared to what we saw in the beginning on the offensive side of the ball. And we'll talk about that game a little bit here to start the show. We're doing these shows on Friday mornings now, which is different than what we did last year. So we'll have the opportunity to talk about Thursday Night Football quickly at the beginning. That's what we'll do each week. And then we mixed up the format a little bit. Last year, we kind of focused heavily on 4 or 5 games and breaking those down in depth. We still want to keep the depth of the analysis that we had last year, but we want to kind of open it up to more markets, more opportunities to talk about different games in different spots. So we're each going to bring a game market bet to the table that we like. We're each going to bring a prop bet to the table that we like, including alts, if anyone so chooses, and then a same-game parlay at the end. So that's kind of how the show is going to work. We'll start off with this Thursday Night Football recap, talk about that Cowboys-Eagles game that Judah alluded to last night. And if you want to go look at the stats, all the grades from that game, you can do so at Premium Stats with a PFF Plus subscription. You'll also get access to the new player prop tool that we are going to kind of walk through and show as we're talking about player props later on in the show. But Mason, what were kind of your high-level takeaways from that Eagles-Cowboys game? It looked like at the beginning we were just going to get a boat race. It started out in the weirdest way possible.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
As an underbetter, I was very grateful for that weather delay, to be completely honest. Yeah. It's one thing we can come and project these games, until we're blue in the face. And when it comes out and they're on the field, you just got to put up or shut up. And the Cowboys did that. They came out strong, and what we saw is the Eagles eventually were able to answer back. They were a little bit slow going, but we did see some things from them that are encouraging, but also, I was pretty low on this Cowboys team after last night. I'm not quite as low anymore.
Yeah, my kind of view on that game last night was that, one, the Cowboys weren't going to be able to run the ball. The Eagles were going to be able to do whatever they wanted on offense. The Cowboys were going to have super high pass volume trying to get back into the game. And I'm going to blame it on Jalen Carter, the Cowboys' success running the ball early. That's probably not entirely the truth, but it was a factor. So that the game didn't necessarily go how I thought it was going to. The Dak didn't necessarily get there on things like completions that I bet probably could have with a few more catches and not drops by CeeDee Lamb. Judah, did you have any? How did you do last night, and did you have any big takeaways?
It was a very mild betting game for me, which is very surprising, and I guess restrained myself. You always want to kind of go, but I didn't see, I thought the market had this game pretty much right, though I do think we learned a lot from this game. I'm not ready to sort of overreact, but there were two things that were almost shocking to me, I'll say, which is when you look at the box score stats, I would have guessed that Dak Prescott had many more passing yards than he actually did. And that's kind of why the EPA per play numbers are a lot higher. They were fairly efficient, but it was sort of a low volume type of game, which I think is going to be pretty typical of Eagles games. The other thing I'll say is just kicking in the NFL is going to be very different this year. I think the field goals are going to matter, and that's going to have a lot of kind of second order effects beyond just players hitting 58-yard field goals. And Jake Elliott's a fine kicker. He struggled a bit last year. But I do think that's something that is pretty noticeable. And I want to be kind of quick too, that this is very different than in previous years.
in a similar boat, it looked like the kickoff return change is going to promote more kickoff returns as well, for sure, based on what we saw last night. So we are going to jump into our game market bets. Each of us have a spread, a total, or a money line that we want to talk about. And I think one of the things that jumped out at this slate to me is not a lot of big spreads, a lot of 2.5s, 2s, 1.5s, 3s. Right, you got the Titans and the Broncos at 8.5. You had the game last night, which was a bigger spread. You've got Cardinals Saints, which is 6.5. But a lot of these, as you can kind of see on the screen here, are kind of viewed as closer competitive games. Mason, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's interesting because we see a couple of road favorites here. Ravens -1.5 versus the Bills. That's been kind of shifting a lot throughout the week. That's going to be a really interesting one to watch. And then, 49ers. I know that we've sort of talked a little bit about the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks might be a value there as the underdog. But it's a really interesting slate with it's going to be a good week of football, and I can sort of understand the measured approach right off the jump.
And Judah, I'll let you just jump into it with your game market bet here. It's one that I like as well. Right, I'm doing circa millions this year for the first time. It's one on the spread that I'm considering. So, what are you looking at this week?
Yeah, I'm looking at the Falcons. I'll bet them on the money line here. It has moved a bit since the initial play, but I still like it. I think it's a kind of two-pronged play. Let's start on the Bucs side of things. I think there's sort of a lot of weight being held on how Tampa Bay finished the season last year, which was a terrific offense. And Baker Mayfield throughout his career has really struggled in pressure to sack rate and his sack avoidance. Last year, I think he was like 24.6, if I remember correctly. And that's like going to be bottom 5 in the NFL every year. And this has been a trend across Baker Mayfield's entire career. But what the Bucs were able to do last season so effectively was throw a bunch of screen passes. They added more total EPA on screen passes than any team but the 2021 Kansas City Chiefs, at least over the last 6 years where this database goes. And that's, I don't think, going to be able to replicate itself. Number one, just because that was like a top percentile outcome. And number two, because the architect of those screens, Liam Cohen, is now coaching in Jacksonville. And I don't think that the offense is going to necessarily be the same. And it's not just that you lose the effectiveness of the screens, but also it has that sort of second order effect of screens happen in a second and a half, or sometimes they're longer developing, whatever it is. You're not going to kind of have the same base rate of pressure plays, which I do think come back. Add in the fact that Tristan Wirfs is out. This is Baker Mayfield's first game without a stud left tackle. He was our number one pass blocking left tackle, and like Baker Mayfield can run into some problems here. That's kind of a bearish view on the Bucs. The Falcons are obviously starting two rookies at edge. We'll see how effective they are. There's obviously some guesswork there, and this was a pass rush which struggled. But I do think that this is a Bucs team that we should not be rating as the same as they were towards the end of last season. It's a different team. On the flip side of the ball, this is much more of a tail play, but I do think there's some probability of that tail happening, which is that like the early data on Michael Penix is really, really good. It's a tiny sample, of course, and we're not gonna run to crown the Falcons as a 13-win team. But Michael Penix in basically all of our metrics, capturing how well you play in system. Mind you, he's got the same offensive coordinator. Lost a couple of offensive line pieces, but it's more or less the same. Was number one in basically everything. By far, best PFF grade, not far behind an EPA per play. And his sack avoidance is terrific, which is a great combination because he can't create much, but if you're going to limit bad plays, and then when the opportunities do come, really take advantage of them, that's a pretty great combination for success. So I'm bullish on the Falcons. I'm extremely bearish on Tampa Bay, and you add that up at home as still underdogs. I think Atlanta we might be favored by the time these next two teams play.
Yeah, the combination of the Tristan Wirfs injury, the Chris Godwin injury, and losing Liam Cohen, I think is significant in a week one game like this, even against an Atlanta defense that not necessarily the most talented defense in the NFL, has historically had no pass rush. Maybe that changes. They certainly invested in it this offseason, like you said, drafting two guys in the first round, bringing in a veteran like Leonard Floyd. Like they've tried to improve it a little bit. And Charlie Heck is the guy replacing Tristan Wirfs. He's a guy who's made spot starts the last couple of years for the 49ers, had a stretch with the Texans where he was starting. It wasn't good. So like that's a matchup that potentially James Pierce, Jalen Walker can get off to a fast start. And then on the other side, I'm with you. Like I think this Atlanta offense has legitimate upside. They certainly have talent at the skill positions. This is typically a very tough Tampa Bay defense to run against. But Bijan and this offense has been able to have moderate success, at least running the ball against this Tampa defense last year. I know Atlanta's also down an offensive tackle in Caleb McGarry. I feel a little bit, I'm not saying I feel great about Elijah Wilkinson. I feel a little bit better, given he's a veteran with a lot of starting experience, has performed a little bit better than Charlie Heck. I feel confident in that offensive line system, their offensive line coach, just in general. So I'm with you there on Atlanta.
Yeah, and Trevor, look away because we're all on board with Atlanta in this one. Atlanta's one of my favorite bets of the week too, and of course Judah got his pick in before me, so he gets to slap his name on this one. No, I'm kidding, but I'm right there with you. And personally, I'm very, very high on James Pierce Jr. I have him as my pick for Defensive Rookie of the Year. And he was absolutely excellent in the preseason. And he was excellent in college, 92.4 PFF passing grade over his last 2 seasons. That's 97th percentile. So he's been pretty incredible. And, he followed it up with a pretty strong preseason, 22.5% pass rush win rate, 8 pressures. So I think he's geared up to have himself a day in this one. And then you guys mentioned it. We talked about Michael Penix Jr. there, and he had very, very high percentile grades in pretty much all of PFF's stable metrics. He was up there, clean pocket grade, 94.9, standard drop back, 92, third and fourth down grade, 91.4. So he really does play well. Like we said, it's a small sample size, but if he can continue to do that, I think he's really, really going to excel and have a great season here.
So Mason, you got sniped on Atlanta, per your own words. So who do you settle with here as your game market bet?
So for me, I'm looking at Houston at +3 on the road in LA. There's some things that we can talk about the Houston offensive line, and I'll get to that in a second. But I want to start with where I'm really liking Houston, and that's on this defense and how they match up with the Rams. This Houston defense is buff, man. They're strong. They can match up in the secondary. Derek Stingley, 2nd in coverage grade. Kamari Lassiter, 12th in coverage grade. They get C.J. Gardner-Johnson after the knee injury scare. He was 6th at safety in coverage grade. So they really match up well. And then I think I'm really worried about the Matthew Stafford potential back injury. Alaric Jackson, blood clots, missed most of camp there. I don't really think that that's a great combination when you're coming up against a pass rushing duo like Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. I think that they're just going to have some trouble there, working out the kinks early on. They're not going to have a bad season. I think they're, a really strong group, but that's something I worry about right off the bat as they haven't had a lot of experience in the preseason. We can talk about the concerns with the Texans offensive line. Jared Verse is going to have himself a day. He's an excellent player. The Rams pass rush is very strong. But what we've sort of seen from the Texans early on here is Nick Haley's trying to get this ball out a bit quicker. We saw the time to pass for Stroud drop from over 3 seconds on average, which was the 7th slowest in the NFL. And they've brought that down quite a bit. Now, it is the preseason, so we don't know the full extent of the offense yet, but Stroud was looking at about a 2.56 average time to throw. The Houston Texans as a whole were about 17th in that department over the preseason. So I'm excited to see what they can do to try to get the ball out quicker. And Caley obviously brings some experience from LA to his new home here in Houston to really figure out that Rams defense. So I think that that's somewhere that they could have an advantage. And really the big edge for me here is the Houston receivers versus the Rams secondary. Judah wrote about it a little bit earlier in the week or earlier in the summer, I believe, on some bets to target in some places to potentially target in this week. And he talked about the improvement of this Rams defense. Judah, you might remember this. When Jared Verse came back, they were a much more productive defense. I still think they are 2 to 3 players away in the secondary from really becoming a dominant unit. Who's going to cover Nico Collins? I mean, that's just got to be a question here. When we look at Darius Williams, Ahkello Witherspoon, Kobe Durant, Emmanuel Forbes, they listed all of these guys on their depth chart as like an either or type of thing. And that worries me. They sort of frame it as, oh, we have 4 starters. I sort of frame it as nobody was really that good to set themselves apart. So they all had below a 63 covered grade last year. This defense post-bye, 5th most receptions over 15 yards, 23rd in open target rate. That's just not really a good recipe when you're coming up against a guy like Nico Collins. And I personally love Jaden Higgins. If anybody watched the draft shows and stuff, I was very big on Jaden Higgins. He was the highest graded receiver when lined up outside last season in the FBS, 89.6 PFF receiving grade. So I'm really bullish on him. And I just think that these Rams corners are going to be hanging on for dear life against these two guys. So I'm excited to see that one. And if you're going to give me some points, I'm going to go ahead and take it.
Bigger opportunity for Higgins as well with the Christian Kirk news that came out. It looks like he's going to be out a few weeks. So there's going to be more targets to go around those rookies. Judah, I'm kind of interested in what you think about this game because I thought about all these points that Mason was making. And I also thought we've talked about how good this Rams offense is when it's at full strength. And yes, Stafford's hurt. He's got the back injury. And yes, Larry Jackson has a back injury. But if both these guys are playing, you replace a declining Cooper Kupp with Devontae Adams, which I do think is an upgrade. And this is still one of the more talented offenses in the NFL. The Rams' pass rush really came on at the end of last year. That is the clear weak point on this Houston Texans roster. So I can kind of see both sides, and I think I'm staying away, but I'm interested if you have a lean.
Yeah, if anything, it's to the under. If I had a lean in, and I guess Texans +3 also, if I had to. Absolutely, your point on the with Kyron Williams, whereas Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Stafford healthy, this offense was number one in every category. I am worried about the fact that it's week 1. Matthew Stafford has not been practicing. I do think these things, while difficult to have a full data set on to perfectly quantify, even just using your brain, that's going to matter. And anecdotally, you look at the Bengals, that could just be your mind playing tricks on you, but you don't need to have such a thorough data study to understand not practicing for week 1 is probably going to make a difference. I think also on the defensive point, what I'm most interested in seeing is the Texans offense, which was so explosive in 2023 and terrible in that category in 2024. Now, obviously, there's some variance and luck involved there. But to Mason's point, this was a defense that even when they did get better, they really struggled to defend the explosive play. But you kind of counter that with the Texans offensive line is dreadful right now. If they're going to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds, are they going to be able to throw deep at all? How are they also going to use their run game, which is probably going to be non-existent here? I mean, maybe Nick Chubb's got something left in the tank, but this was not a good run game. In some ways, it's really a question of offensive coordinator, really, which is how are the Texans going to design their offense? How explosive? How many deep shots are they going to take? How successful will they be? Well, there are a lot of questions, and I see this game taking a bunch of different paths. And I totally agree with Mason, which is why I like the under here. I still think this is a terrific Texans defense, which matches up extremely well with the Rams. And you add on all that injury stuff, surely the market knows about. But I still think this is a really difficult matchup, and I see this game playing a ton of different ways. But I do think if I had the more likely outcome, it's the defense is getting the best of both teams.
We will move on to my game market bet, and I'm going with an under. I'm going with the under tonight in Chiefs-Chargers, the Friday night game in Brazil. I think when you look at this game, the two times they played last year, it was 17-10. It was 19-17, so comfortably under that 46.5. And I think we kind of see a similar style of game. The Chiefs, one of the least explosive teams in the NFL, right? The 26th in explosive pass rate last year, dead last in explosive run rate. So if they're moving the ball is typically these long, methodical drives that are eating clock. And that's to say, if they are moving the ball, I expect they'll have some offensive success, but this was also a Chargers team that did a pretty good job against them last year, and they will once again be without Rashee Rice in this game. And there's injuries on both sides, right? The Chiefs are without Rashee Rice. The Chargers are without Rashawn Slater. And that was the case in Week 4 last season when they played. And Justin Herbert was pressured on over 50% of his dropbacks. In that game, Joe Alt was also out, so I'm not going to act like that was all Rashawn Slater. They were playing with 2 backup tackles, which is a factor. But I do think losing Rashawn Slater, especially against the Steve Spagnuolo defense that does a really good job of giving you different looks, blitzing creatively, creating unblocked rushers, like it's a tough matchup to be down one of the better tackles in the NFL, which they're going to have to deal with, obviously, for the whole of this season, but especially in Week 1. Right, and I also think there's a chance that we see the Chargers come out. We talked a lot last year about how this Chargers team, the first couple of weeks, it's like 60% run rate. It's like, oh my God, they're just feeding J.K. Dobbins. They're not passing the ball at all. Then that flipped on its head, and we talked about that a lot, betting some of these Justin Herbert angles and SGPs. I'm kind of interested to see if they go back to being a lot more run heavy, given that you draft Marion Hampton in the first round, you bring in Najee Harris, who's going to play this week after the whole eye injury, no one knew what happened thing. It seems like he's going to play behind Marion Hampton. So you invest pretty heavily in the running back position. And I don't think that means that they're going to not use Justin Herbert, but it could be more of a run focus, play action shots type of thing, which again, similar to what I was talking about with the Chiefs and these longer drives, seeing the same thing with the Chargers. So I like the under 46.5 in this game. You have any thoughts on that, Mason?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, especially when you get into some of these divisional games. They really just are hard fought, especially in the AFC West. We've seen these play out, just like you said, both times last season. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Under 46.5, it's just a little bit higher than it should be. I'd probably put it a couple points lower. I think you're going to see a very run-heavy script as well. It just only makes sense. Omarion Hampton's such a high draft pick for the Chargers there. The Chiefs, I still don't know what to make of the Chiefs. There's a world where the Chiefs won 6 games last season, and that's honestly the world that I had wish I had seen as a, Denver supporter who was on the receiving end of a couple of those tough ones there. But I'm really interested to see how this one plays out. It's definitely going to be a hard-fought game. Judah, what are you seeing in this one?
Yeah, I think that the points about the run game are I agree with them, and like you can talk about the revealed preference. I mean, they signed Najee Harris and drafted Omarion Hampton and did not draft a wide receiver in the first round and waited to draft Trey Harris. Like I think that's a pretty big tell there. And now certainly without Slater, I imagine they're going to try and run the ball a whole bunch. I think what's like, I don't know if it's so relevant for this game, but I do think will come up. Is I don't think this Chargers defense, unless Minter is like a top 5 defensive coordinator, is going to be nearly as good as they were last year. I think a lot of that was propagated, if you just look back at their opponents, by some bad quarterbacks. But just looking up this roster, there's not a lot of talent. There's a very old Khalil Mack in there, and the rest is pretty bad. On the Chiefs side, there was a world in which they won 6 games. I think there's also the world we inhabit that Patrick Mahomes basically will it's inversely, Patrick Mahomes' offensive output is inversely correlated with the defensive output. Like the better the Chiefs defense is, the better Patrick Mahomes is. That's true on the macro level and on the micro level, where like in game, he's just going to do whatever it takes. Like it's not a coincidence that he is by far the best quarterback in the NFL in the fourth quarter. Not a coincidence that he wins 80% of one-score games. Like this is just what it means to be the peak or number one quarterback. So in that sense, I'm less concerned about kind of how the Chiefs' output has been. I think very interesting to see how well Patrick Mahomes evades pressure. That's something he struggled with towards the end of last year. I don't think it's going to come up this year. So if anything, I think if the Chiefs, they are going to be methodical. If they score touchdowns on all their drives, or they score, 4 of them, I think this game could go over, but that's almost the path, is you need to be perfect. Certainly because I do not have kind of much weight on the Chargers pulling here and scoring a bunch.
Yeah, and I'll throw out we're about to jump into props, but I'll throw out a bonus prop for this game since it's the Friday Island game. I'm pretty heavy on Juju all receptions in this spot. I think Andy Reid came out and they were asking about who's going to replace Rashee Rice. He mentioned Juju first. He says he's felt as good as he has in a long time. Obviously, that is training camp speak for 80% of players. But I do believe that kind of slot role and some of the lower ADOT stuff, it's like, yes, they were giving Xavier Worthy some of that stuff. But that's not really, I don't think Hollywood Brown's going to get a ton, and I'm kind of in on Juju.
Let me ask you this. If you're Andy Reid 2 weeks ago, you don't know if Rashee Rice is getting suspended. Obviously, you're preparing for this game. Do you almost have the game plan designed for Rice, and that was part of and you're just going to slot in Smith-Schuster? Do you think it's something you adapt?
I want it, given my bet slips, I want to believe that, Judah.
Okay.
Really
okay.
Do. So I'll say yes.
There we go.
So we're going to jump into prop bets, and we're going to do a segment on the show this year called Prop Culture, where we're going to have everyone watching throw out some of their favorite prop bets. We'll go through the chat. We'll pick 3 of our favorites. We'll put them together and bet them on our end, and all the winnings from that are going to go to a charity at the end of the season. So if you guys have favorite prop bets this week, feel free to throw them out in the chat. And we'll get started with Judah. I will also be previewing the PFF player prop tool that just came out. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited to dive into it this year. It has all of our projections, all of our cover probabilities, all of our edges, along with being a hub to do research, showing our matchup scores, showing defenses in different facets. You can see hit rates against similar defenses based off of the work that our data science team has done to kind of look at these teams schematically. You can shop odds for each of these player props. You can filter by game, by prop, by anything. So I'm kind of going to be walking through that while we go through these bets, but we're going to get things started with Judah. Judah, who do you like this week?
Yeah, Marvin Mims over 36.5 receiving yards. This is a player who had some, in a very kind of low sample of routes, some elite numbers. He was earning targets at nearly a 29% clip and was extremely efficient with those targets at a 2.8 yards per route run. The problem, as I just kind of illustrated, was he didn't see too many routes because he was kind of in a timeshare there. Everyone in the Broncos was rotating behind Cortland Sutton. But number one, they traded Devon Vele. I think, again, some signal of trying to make this room less crowded. And then you don't want to read too much, I don't think, into the efficiency of preseason. But what I do think is relevant is who was getting the first team reps. And Marvin Mims was in on 25 of 27 of Bo Nix's dropbacks, suggesting that he might actually be the wide receiver 2 here. And if this guy is seeing a 80% share of the routes, 36.5 is just way too low.
Yeah, we got the player prop tool pulled up here. You can see finished the end of the season strong. Shout out to producer Eli in the back. His 120-yard, 2-touchdown performance helped me win the fantasy championship against him. So he definitely finished the season strong. And you can see here against some of the similar defenses as well, right? Cleared that projection line. Our projections are siding a little bit on the under just based on the edge. So it's a little bit of man versus machine here for Judah. But I do like Mim's spot, right? And I think this Tennessee defense in general is okay, right? But Mims has a clear role. They trade away Devon Vele. He was targeted at a high rate. He should be out there on the field a decent amount, given it's Sutton, him, Franklin, and rookie Pat Bryant. So, like you said, pretty clear number 2 target there.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Marvin Mims this year. If we look at his PFF receiving grades from week 11 to week 18, let me just list off this list here for you guys. Number 1, Puka Nacua. 2, Mike Evans. 3, Drake London. 4, Marvin Mims. 5, A.J. Brown. 6 Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's elite company to be a part of. I think that if we can see a bigger sample of him, get him some more targets, I think you're going to really see an eruption from Mims. And I agree. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 2 for this team all season. And I'm big on the over there too. So I'm riding there with you, Judah.
All right,
man over machine.
Yeah.
There we go.
Maybe we do a man versus machine segment and one of us picks against each week at least. Mason, who do you got for yours?
So this is one that I actually wrote about a little bit this week over at PFF.com, so you guys can go check that one out. I really like TJ Hawkinson to go over 4.5 receptions here, plus 115 was where I had it at. It might be a little bit adjusted now. But when he returned from his injury in week 9, he had volume. KOC kept him involved. He was targeted in over 20% of his routes. That was 9th highest in the NFL over that span. He had a 78.9 receiving grade. That was 8th. I think that he's really just going to absolutely eat this Bears defense up, just like he did last season in 2 games. He had 17 targets, 12 receptions in those 2 games. He covered this line in both of those matchups. Adam Thielen back in the mix. I mean, it's going to take some getting used to with J.J. McCarthy, so I think there's some transition period there. No Jordan Addison, so I really think that T.J. Hawkinson is going to be in line again for a big and highly productive day. As you can see with the key insights, he's really facing a plus matchup here against a Bears defense that did struggle last season. Now, it remains to be seen if they're going to end up picking it up, but I think that this is going to be a good one for Hawkinson for sure.
Yeah, and you see here a lot of the matchup data for Hawkinson against the Bears is favorable. Is worth noting the Bears are bringing in a new defensive coordinator, Dennis Allen, who I'm fairly high on in general. But I do think it's a great matchup for Hawkinson. Given the Jordan Addison suspension that you mentioned, right? There's more volume to go around. Bears struggled against tight ends last year, as you can see here by the key insights. That's also thrown in the overview of the player prop tool where we have one. You can see the injuries here, and you can see the latest news related to that bet, including Mason writing it up for PFF.com. So there you go. My bet, I'm going to go with an under. I'm going to kind of zag on these 2 overs. I'm going to go Breece Hall under 11.5 rushing attempts at minus 106. And I think my main rationale for this bet is, I'll start out by saying I think the Jets are going to run the ball a lot more than they did last year, obviously, in terms of rate. They had 21 designed runs last year. That was dead last in the NFL. Aaron Glenn, the new head coach, coming over from Detroit, who had 31 designed run plays per game, 3rd most in the NFL. I don't think the Jets are going to get up to that number because I don't think their offense is going to be as good as the Lions' offense, and I don't think they're going to run as many plays. But I do think they are going to run the ball at a higher rate, given how we've heard Aaron Glenn talk about kind of establishing that physical identity, wanting to run the ball. I also think they're going to rotate through these running backs a lot more than we saw last year. You can see there, Braylon Allen had an 82.0 rushing grade in 2024. Breece Hall was at 68.7. So it's not difficult to make the argument that Braylon Allen was the more effective runner last season. And if you hear how they're talking about him this year, Zach Rosenblatt, who's the Jets writer for The Athletic, his bold prediction for the Jets this year was that Braylon Allen leads the team in rushing. Right, you kind of hear the coaching staff talk about him being that physical, difficult to tackle guy that I think they're going to favor in this offense. Isaiah Davis is going to probably be in that mix too and get a few carries. And then Justin Fields, right? I think unlike what we saw with the Steelers early last season, I think the Jets brought in Justin Fields with the intent of featuring him in the running game. So he's also going to eat into that running workload. And the Steelers defense, it's good, right? I think it's one of the more talented defenses in the league on paper. I know they struggled against the run at the end of last year, and that Baltimore Ravens game is kind of seared into everyone's memory. But their defensive front is up there in terms of talent in the NFL. They'll be without first-round pick Derek Harmon in this game. And Cam Hayward has kind of been dealing with the contract holdout. Will he play, won't he play type of deal, but I think he'll end up playing. And they're talented throughout. So I think the Jets are going to struggle offensively in this game. I think they're going to split the workload in the backfield. And I like Breece Hall under 11.5 rushing attempts. Yeah,
I agree with you there. I think I love the bold prediction there. I'm right there with you. That Braylon Allen is definitely going to be a bigger force in this offense after the efficiency that we saw and the grading that we saw from him last year. So I'm right on board with you.
All right, before we jump into the same game parlays this week, I know it's tough to find great candidates out there. Right? It's you're wading through a lot of resumes. It's tough to find the people with the right skills and experience, but not with ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter finds amazing candidates for you fast, and you can go to ZipRecruiter.com/audio and try it for free, and let them find the candidates with the right skills for you. ZipRecruiter's smart technology identifies top talent for your roles quickly. Immediately after you post your job, ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology starts showing you qualified people for it. Ditch the other hiring sites and let ZipRecruiter find what you're looking for, the needle in the haystack. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try it for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/audio. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/audio. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, now we'll get into kind of the bread and butter here, especially for Judah, and talking about some of these bet a little, win a lot, but smartly, same game parlay angles. And we're going to start out with one. I messaged Judah yesterday, 2 days ago, and I'm like, I'm kind of falling in love with this. And Judah's like, did you hear me talk about this on another podcast? And I was like, no. So I let Judah take it since he had already laid claim.
I was gonna lead and say you were the good man letting me have this one. But the play I really like is Russell Wilson to Darius Slayton, and the alts there. I think you can get. I mean, like the prices are going to change. I think I saw something like a 275 and 100 was like 45 to 1. But the play here is, I guess, twofold. Number one, the Washington defense played a ton of single coverage towards the end of last season. That trend continued in the preseason. I believe they played the second most, which I, again, don't really care about the results of it so much, but stylistically, I think it implies that they're going to continue on the same trend they were last year. Which matters, number one, because Russell Wilson was much, much, much better against single coverage. He was second in PFF grade, I think fourth in EPA, and also he had the highest depth of target in the NFL against single coverage, which I think is going to play right into the strengths of Darius Slayton. Obviously, Malik Neighbors is also a terrific play here. It's just that the markets have certainly caught up there. With Slayton, he's always been a terrific separator, especially deep. He was like top 20 in single coverage separation last season. But when you have Daniel Jones, who was just awful at throwing the deep ball throughout his tenure in New York, and Drew Lock and just like Tommy DeVito, whoever was quarterbacking at different points of the season last year, it was not really turned into realized production here. And I don't think Russell Wilson's the answer to the Giants winning a Super Bowl, but I do think he certainly can hit a bunch of deep balls, which is exactly the spot. Slayton's ADOT at like 15 was also one of the highest in the NFL. I anticipate that role to continue. They're going to take some deep shots. I don't think that whether it's Marshawn Lattimore at this age, I don't even know if he's going to be fully out there. The single coverage, the corners on Washington, none of them graded even in the top half of the NFL in our coverage category. So there are going to be plenty of shots here. This is the exact sort of matchup for Darius Slayton to excel. And I think I've been a Brian Dable whisperer for a long time. He's certainly coaching for his job. I'm fairly bullish on this Giants passing offense, and I think this is a sneaky good spot, especially if they're not kind of in a slugfest with Washington taking up 9-minute drives.
Yeah, it's the other part of it is I'm like comfortable with Russell Wilson in a clean pocket. It's when he starts to break down that I'm not, and I'm not that worried about this Washington pass rush. They added Von Miller, who is well past the prime of his career, had some decent games last season. Maybe he can still turn back the clock and kind of have a big performance here, but I kind of doubt it. And then Javon Kinlaw was their other big signing in the offseason, right? And I don't think you're super worried about him causing havoc on the interior. So I think he's going to have clean pockets to work from. I honestly kind of like pairing this with Giants money line. Even I'm on the Washington
130 to 1.
Yeah, I'm on the Washington regression train. Just in terms of the stuff, close games, fourth downs, oldest team in the NFL. Like there's a lot of stuff that points to the idea that Washington and Jane Daniels might even be better, right? And they're not necessarily going to be as good as they are last year. And the Giants, the defensive front is legit. Like it's scary given what we've seen from Abdul Carter.
Other than the Steelers, can we name a better defensive front right now? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. It's difficult. What, Mason, you got it? You got anything?
I mean, I don't even think the Steelers are. I mean, the Steelers are a really great defensive front. Don't get me wrong, but that's 4 of the most juiced up pass rushers I've seen in a long time. So no, I'm with you there.
Yeah, so I'm honestly on board with and I bet it myself, pairing Russ with Slayton with some Giants money line. So hopefully we'll be happy when we come back here next week. Mason, what do you got for yours?
Okay, so for my same game parlay, we're going back to the Steelers-Jets game that you alluded to a little bit ago. You know, Dalton and Trev talked about this one on the NFL show, what was it, yesterday or Wednesday? I forget, the days meshed together. And the Jets are just going to struggle offensively. We just talked about it. This Steelers defense is just stacked up. Rodgers' revenge game, we can talk about all the storylines. I mean, Fields has a bit of a revenge game too, but I don't think it's quite as headline-grabbing as Rodgers' return to MetLife there. So I'm taking Pittsburgh -3. I'm taking DK Metcalf's under at 54.5 yards. Calvin Austin over 2.5 receptions. And TJ Watt to record a sack. So, I mean, we can start with just DK Metcalf. He's going to get a lot of Sauce Gardner. Aaron Glenn ran the most cover one in the NFL last season in Detroit. And when these two matched up in week 13 last season, Sauce held DK to 1 reception for 28 yards. I think we're going to see a lot of that too, a lot of press man coverage, and they're just going to go to work. They're going to battle. It's going to be a really hard fought matchup there. I think 54.5 is just a little bit high. I mean, he was only able to beat him on one, go ball there last time they played in week 13. So I'm just not really in on the DK breakout right off the bat. I do think he's going to have a tremendous season for them, just maybe not in this one here. Calvin Austin, I think, is another great option to go over at 2.5 receptions. He had a really strong finish last season. 5th in highest passer rating when targeted at 142.8. He was really solid against contested catches, had an 80% contested catch rate. I mean, he's more than just speed, and Rodgers was talking about that a bit in the offseason, about how they can trust him to go over the middle. He gets Michael Carter, who I think is a little bit up in the air, herniated disc last season, really hindered him, 47.9 coverage grade, but I think that there's going to be an opportunity there for Calvin Austin to sort of shake free and get some targets over the middle there. And then last but certainly not least, we have TJ Watt +1 sack. Armand Membu's debut, I mean, he's a great player, but this is just going to be a tough draw. TJ Watt is an all-pro and one of the best pass rushers in the league for a reason. And the Jets O-line right now is shuffled up with the Elijah Vera Tucker news. Joe Tippmann's going to be playing right guard. He's a really good player, but that is going to be a transition. And that sort of brings into the question the chemistry and communication over there on that right side. There's probably going to be some stunts, some moves there. And we're going to need to see what they can do to communicate and really blend together early on, quick and on the fly. So I like all of those picks there. And then I like Pittsburgh to cover at -3 for sure.
Yeah, on the offensive line point specifically, that's something that I think I generally kind of fade when the narrative is this offensive line got so much better and it's rookies. So like this year with Armand Membu and the Jets, with Will Campbell and the Patriots, with Josh Connerly and the Commanders, like these teams that they were talking about the offensive line improving so much, yes, they're more talented, but you typically don't see guys just hit the ground running week one as rookies. Sometimes you do. Joe Alt, Tristan Wirfs, like there are cases where you see that, but a lot of times it takes these guys some time to develop. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you on the pass rush being able to get home a little bit for Pittsburgh. And we'll finish it off with my same game parlay angle. and I'm going to Seattle, San Francisco, and it seems like the consensus is that this 49ers team is going to bounce back. They're going to win a lot of games. They're NFC West favorites now, and that certainly could be the case. But I'm looking at what they were last year to what they are right now, and it's like the skill position injuries, it's the same thing. Right? Brandon Ayuk's out. Christian McCaffrey's after a whole offseason of talking about how he's healthy and he's fully back, he shows up on the injury report with a calf injury on Thursday. Juwan Jennings is questionable, and he has the whole contract situation. And this is a really good Seahawks defense, right? With Mike McDonald, they have talent at all three levels of this defense. And the Seahawks offense, when Sam Darnold went there and you trade away DK Metcalf, I was like, all right, I'm not going to be that high on the Seahawks offense, but I'm kind of starting to buy in a little bit. And in this matchup specifically, Clint Kubiak comes over as offensive coordinator. They're going to base the whole offense on outside zone, play action, what we saw with the Saints last season. And maybe there's some subconscious part of my brain thinking back to the Saints week 1 and 2 where they put up 40
fell in love.
And I was like, this is going to be every week. And I'm like, maybe CX offense does the same exact thing where week 1 and week 2 they come out and they're like, they score 45 points and 500 yards. And but the outside zone stuff specifically, the 49ers run defense was bad last year, specifically on outside zone. 5.2 yards allowed per outside zone run last season. That was worst in the NFL. They made some changes to try to improve their run defense, mainly through the draft, drafting Mykel Williams, drafting 2 defensive tackles, a linebacker, right, a slot corner. Right, they really focused their draft capital on the defense. I don't know if that's going to have a major impact in week 1 against the Seahawks offense that wants to run the ball. And given what we've seen in the preseason, they're probably going to be able to run the ball a lot better than they were last year. They drafted Gray Zabel in the first round. They get Abraham Lucas back at right tackle, right? They bring in Clint Kubiak. Like I have more confidence in Seattle's ability to run the ball and then take play action shots off of it. And that's something Sam Darnold did really well last year with the Vikings, is taking downfield shots off play action. He averaged over 10 yards per attempt off play action last year. It was a top 5 mark in the NFL. Both of the Seahawks' top receiving options can work in the slot. They're probably going to play JSN more outside this year, but both of them can work in the slot. San Francisco's starting Upton Stout, who was a mid-round rookie who missed all of the preseason, as their starting slot cornerback. So yes, I know you bring in Robert Saleh, you put this draft capital to improve your defense, but I'm kind of buying into this idea of the Seahawks being able to be efficient in the passing game and run the ball a good amount, which I realized I haven't even talked about my bets yet, but the actual bets for this same game parlay are Darnold 250 plus passing yards, under 29.5 attempts, to try to tell the story of efficient, low volume passing, deep shots, and get the inverse correlation. And then Charbonnet 40 plus rushing yards, because I do think they are going to mix him in with Kenneth Walker a decent amount in the run game. He's been talked pretty highly of this year. And Seahawks minus 3.5, which is 50 to 1.
I'd just say I hate the spot and I love the angle. What I mean by that is, like, I think you're like really capturing in on a perfect kind of game script, which is like, if the Seahawks, they're going to run the ball a ton, I think that means both a lot of volume for Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet. Like, they're going to need to be extremely efficient. What terrifies me is, like, if they're not in any sort of positive game state, like the San Francisco pass rush should be able to tee off on Seattle, right? But you're almost saying, like, no, this game state, this only really happens if they're constantly playing from ahead, they're successful with the run game, they're able to utilize the play action. So I love the spot, even though I can't get past the Seahawks offense and really struggling against the San Francisco front. But
I was deep in it. I was looking for like Torrey Horton alt lines because I think he's going to be their deep threat. Those didn't exist.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on like where my Roman Wilson alts.
Yeah. But yeah, this is only going to happen if the Seahawks are having offensive success, which it's a 50 to 1 bet. Like, I think there's a reasonable enough chance based on what I said that game script happens, and then this is an outcome that I want to bet on.
Yeah, I agree with you. The Seahawks were actually one of the underdogs that I wrote about this week that I thought had some value there, particularly at home. When you look at this 49ers defense, they were 28th in team PFF run defense grade last season. That was a 54.6, and they spent a lot of draft capital on trying to improve that, but it doesn't really look like that quite came together as much in the preseason, and they still really struggle with missed tackles. 33.6 team PFF tackling grade. They logged the second most missed tackles in August. And I think that becomes a problem when you come up against, a running game that involves a guy like Kenneth Walker, who I know that he's been dealing with the foot, but he had the second highest missed tackle rate forced per attempt since he entered the league in 2022. That's a 0.27. So I think that that's really not a great combination for them to be coming up against when they've struggled so much against the run.
So I've convinced you. I've convinced you both.
We're tailing. We're on there.
Yeah. That's all we got this week. To close it out, I will shout out the props that you guys threw out in the chat that we will throw together, bet, and then all winnings are going to go to a charity of later choosing, because we had not decided on one before the week 1 episode. But the bets are from Sideline Football, Tet over 5.5 receptions, Sam Darnold under 30.5 passing attempts from Adam's Digest. Shout out to Adam. That was before we talked about Seahawks, and I mentioned that bet as part of my SGP.
That's Ben's all.
Yeah, that's my burner. I mean, I'm in the YouTube chat on burners. And then David Njoku over 4.5 receptions from Beckett. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll be back same time next week. Good luck with all of your week 1 bets, and hopefully everyone's a little richer come week 2.